you're all very welcome to this practice support information session. And we'll be getting started at 1 o'clock sharp. And just to note that the call is recorded and we will be sending it out at the end of the week and it'll be available on the Law Society YouTube channel. And today we're going to be discussing applying to be a judge and how it works. So Andrew, thanks for joining us today. And we're here with...
Just while we're waiting for people to join, and for the benefit of those who have joined early, as it were, just to give a bit of my own background. I qualified in 1990, which means I'm 32 years qualified. For those 32 years, I practiced in Newbridge and County Kildare with Reedy Stafford. I was managing partner there for the last 18 or 20 years, mostly did litigation. Did some district court, but Pat Reedy in our office did most of the district court, and I was the sub whenever he was away or on holidays or playing golf, or I did some family law. So I wasn't a stranger to the district court, but I wasn't a pure district court practitioner. I was involved with the Law Society, as you know, for many years, and chairman of the Complaints Committee and chairman of the Advertising Regulations Committee and so on, and did other sort of quasi-judicial work with the Turf Club and Garda disciplinary bodies and that sort of stuff, which all helped the CV for this sort of a job. And I think I'll be returning to that later on, but that is important. I think you're a good CV, as it were.
Yeah. So I know it's just gone now 1 o'clock, so I know we're tight for time. So I think we'll get started. So you're all very welcome formally to this practice support information session. And I'm joined by Andrew Cody, who's a district court judge, and Sonia McEntee, who's a solicitor and counsel member. Just a hats off to Bill Holohan, who was supposed to be on the call with us today and is joining us from, he's recuperating. So get well soon, Bill. Yeah, so over to you, Sonia.
Thanks a lot, Justin. And thanks very much to Judge Andrew Cody for joining us today in terms of having a look at the life of a district court judge, and I suppose how or why solicitors might consider this as being an option for them. So in terms of getting started, Andrew, when were you appointed and what are your first impressions? Would you recommend life as a judge?
Be sorry state if I wasn't recommending it at this stage. Catherine Staines was the district court judge in District 15 here for say 12, I think about 12 years, and she was promoted to the circuit court in February. So I was nominated then by the government in April, and I was sworn in May. And I started my assignment here in Tullamore and Portlaoise almost every second day over and back in mid-July. So I've been here since then.
And in terms of, I suppose, pros and cons, your transition from practice life now to from the other side.
Well, I think it's very important that if anybody thinks of applying, to realize that there are super pros, but there are disadvantages. It is not all a bed of roses, and particularly as a movable judge, which I'll come back to. But some of the things that I would have noticed, it's a very respected, I suppose, and hopefully respectable position, and you have a lot of responsibility and you have a lot of authority. And that is, you have to be conscious of that all of the time. If you're that sort of person, you're giving back to the community, you're serving the community. The pay is excellent, and I'll come back to that, and particularly the pension, which isn't often spoke about. You have excellent holidays. You, as an assigned judge, you have all of August off. You have Christmas, you have Easter, and you have 12 other days off as well. So the holidays are good. But the big change for me, I have no emails, nobody sending me an email. I have nobody phoning me. I have no phone calls to return. So in terms of the stress of practice, it's a huge difference. If you're working in the CCJ, where there are usually between 6 and 8 district court judges working, it's very collegial. It's a lovely place to work. The facilities there are great. So from that point of view, there are a lot of cons, but the big thing is that you don't have to deal with emails, you don't have to deal with clients. It is the sort of on the flip side of that, it is hard work. It's a sitting job where you're sitting. Usually I start at 10 o'clock and you do search warrants and all that sort of stuff, and you don't get finished till 5 or 6 o'clock. So it's a long enough day. And there can be pressure and there can be stress just to complete cases, get through work, all that sort of stuff. It is a high profile position, and that in itself carries some risk. I think you need to be conscious of that. So you need to be just careful about yourself, and particularly if you're in the area. I was at a function in this area for the first time at the weekend, and I knew I was being recognized in a pub. And that just puts you on edge when, you know, you see a fellow at the bar and he's looking at you wondering where he saw you before. And suddenly the other two lads turn around to have a look to see who you are.
So being recognized as the judge.
Yeah, and I mean, there was no issue, but you just need to be careful all the time.
Yeah.
So no, other than that, there's no great risk to it, but you just need to be conscious. You are on duty 24/7, so you can be called out at any time, day or night. The average for this area is to be called out every second week at the weekends. I was called out on Sunday night at 11 o'clock. I had to get up, drive down to Portlaoise. It only took 10 minutes, but drive back home again. So that's normal and par for the course. Biggest thing that I noticed in terms of the cons is you lose your first name. And I don't like it, and I've said that to lots of people. You meet people now and it's good morning, Judge, and this sort of stuff. And even solicitors you would have known and colleagues you've known, barristers. I just don't like it. You know,
very interesting, because I wouldn't ever have considered it from that perspective, and yet,
yeah,
I let you know myself, that's exactly what I would say.
yeah. And I mean, I've known you for years through the council and that sort of stuff, and that's. I mean, when you know somebody like that and you're on first name terms and it's chit chat, and again, an example, I was playing, a group of us go away to play golf every year, and recently we went away and there was a young barrister who actually appeared before me the following week. But it was just, I mean, I got drawn to play with them and it was just so awkward. After the fourth or fifth hole, I had to say, Sean, my name is Andrew. You can call me Andrew, please. Yeah. And he didn't say anything. He never referred to me as judge or nothing. He just avoided the subject. And it was getting awkward. So yeah, so anyway, my colleagues just say, listen, you don't like it, but you've no choice, get used to it, which is probably what has happened. I mean, you have very little time for yourself in planning things. So you have no phone. I'm out of contact completely during normal business hours between 10 and 1 and between 2 and 5. So if you need to phone your accountant to talk about your tax today or anything else, I have to do that before 10 o'clock or else I just don't get him or he doesn't get me. And things like I've noticed before, you need to get your eyes tested. Oh yeah, I'll walk across the road and get it done tomorrow. That's now a logistical exercise to take a day off. Right. So from that point of view, okay. The other thing I'd like to say is that in terms of being appointed, I mean, I was lucky to be assigned to this district straight away, but being unassigned, I should say, and being a movable judge is no pleasant job to me. Some people like it. Some people like the lack of responsibility. You can turn up, you know, I was talking, as I said, to a colleague today who was going to deal with family law matters up in the west of Ireland, and she'll go in and she'll deal with them and that's it. She has no other responsibility as regards the district or the list or anything else. She just goes and does her job and that's it. Some of them like that. But you are driving the length and breadth of the country, and you could easily be assigned to Donegal to do a childcare case that could last 3 weeks. And you're gone, doesn't matter about your children, your family, the house, doesn't matter anything else. You'll be gone to Donegal on Sunday evening and you won't come back until late on Friday night. And that you could have that for 3 weeks in a row. So being immovable isn't a whole pile of beans. It's something I wouldn't have liked. And but for that, I was just so lucky to get this district. I could also have been, you know, I could have been immovable and I mightn't be as happy as I am today. And you can expect to be immovable for, you know, a year, 2, 3 years. Most people are, before they get their own district, before something suitable comes up.
Right. And you've referenced very well, I suppose, some of the stresses that we deal with in, you know, God, the calls and the email are probably number 1 and number 2. And
none of them.
Yeah, but also the flexibility that we also have on, and even going having a cup of coffee with someone after maybe we've been in court for the morning. So and moving into that more structured kind of day. If that's 10 until 6, it seems to me that there's a very high level of focus and concentration required.
Yes.
Extended period. So do you find that challenging?
It is, and I mean, you're sitting there in the spotlight, you know, for 4 and 5 hours a day, and you can't afford to switch off or look out the window for a second. Touch wood, it has happened to me once, and it was a simple road traffic matter, and guard was giving evidence, and I obviously just wasn't listening. I don't know what was on my mind, and I asked him, what was the annual rate of duty, as in it was a no tax summons, and he says, oh no, this is no NCT, and I said, all right, okay, sorry. And I realized I was just my mind had wandered somewhere else, but that's the only time. But you just have to keep listening, and concentration, and you can't give up. For a moment, really. That is exhausting. And my Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are pretty busy, and you would be knackered on a Thursday evening. You really would. After that, Monday and Friday is not so bad, but Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are pretty heavy going.
And before, I suppose I'll ask you a little bit about your practice background, maybe, and before we get into the application process. But what kind of qualities do you feel are essential in someone who might be interested in pursuing this as a career move?
Being a sort of a brilliant lawyer isn't the be all and end all. I mean, when it boils down to it, essentially you're a referee, and you have to make decisions, and you have to try and make decisions that are fair and sound and practical. I think good communication, particularly in the courtroom, is essential. I mean, it's a horrendous ordeal for somebody to come into court if they've never been in court before. I mean, you see people coming in shaking, crying, particularly in family law or any other case. So you have to be able to talk to them in language that they understand as clear and that they don't perceive in any way threatening. So being able to talk to people and for people to understand, talk their language is the wrong way about it, but you just have to avoid jargon so that people feel comfortable in the courtroom. You have to be able to conduct yourself with a bit of dignity as well. And that goes with the job. I mean, it is a dignified job. So 4-letter words or, dodgy dealings or anything else is just a no-no. And I mean, if anybody has that sort of stuff or in the background or anything, just don't bother. It's just not worth it. I mean, you do work independently, and you do have to manage a pretty heavy workload. So managing your list, getting through the list, bringing people along with you, those are all, to be able to work at a fast pace. But I think above all, and I said it when I started here, I said when I started here on the day I started that, my sole object in many respects was to treat people with respect and courtesy. And I said, if at the end of every day, I can stand up and say, I treated everybody with respect and courtesy that day, I've upheld my own standards and the standards that everybody in the courtroom is entitled to expect of me. I think that's absolutely essential. And I wouldn't have any time for anybody doing anything else. People need to be treated with respect, and I've always been that way. You need to be a bit self-aware as well. I mean, there's a lot of, being honest about it, fawning that goes on. Yes, Judge, may it please the court. All this, people grovel, being blunt about it. And you could become a bit of, get a bit of judgeitis, as they say, pretty quickly. So you need to have a little bit of self-awareness that you know yourself and that you protect yourself from becoming arrogant or, haughty or whatever, other minor indiscretion you might have. But you do need to be, I think, self-aware and just to know that you're behaving yourself as you should behave. Because there's very few people to criticize you. They won't criticize you.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, I suppose the two things just that struck me, and one, I think you didn't use the word, but I think where you were going was, but the open mind. So when you talk about justice and being seen, justice being
yes.
to be done, that you're open minded, but that you're seen to be open minded in terms of when something gets started.
Yes.
Partiality, and then when you say about the dignity and respect for every person that comes.
Yeah.
I mean, we see this in practice ourselves because people are more likely to accept bad news, or what they don't want to hear is likely to be more accepted by them in a better way if it's in that manner.
We'll get to the application process in a minute. One of my, I was chairman of the complaints committee, as you know, in the Law Society for 3 years, and that was in my CV. But in my reference, which I got from a senior person in the Law Society, one of the proudest things I had, in that 3 years that I was chairman of the complaints committee, no decision of mine or a committee that I chaired was ever appealed.
Right.
And that, and again, not getting judgeitis and being boastful, but that's something that I was very proud of. And it stemmed from the fact that if you treat people with respect, they respect your decision. Yeah. And if you treat people with disrespect and shout or growl at them or anything else, they'll have no time for you or your decision.
Yeah. So
I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, they've been listened to, and they feel that
Yes.
whatever the issue is, has
And they've got a fair hearing.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's hugely important.
Oh no. So would you take just a couple of minutes to tell us about, I suppose, your own career path? What brought you?
Yeah.
Now, how long ago? At what point along your career did you start to think, oh, maybe this is something I'd like to do, and then maybe take us through into the application process?
Okay. Well, I suppose career. I suppose, I thought about it the bones of 10 years ago. I mean, I always sort of thought that by 55, I'd like a change of job. And I suppose I was maybe 2 years late getting the change of job. But after 32 years in practice dealing with road traffic and whiplash and, family law and that sort of stuff, I was a bit, not burnt out is the wrong word, but I'd had enough of it at that stage. So I applied initially 2 years ago, nearly 3 years ago now at this stage. So I was 2 years waiting before I was nominated. But I'd certainly thought about it for about 10 years before that. I mean, there are very few appointments of people under 40. They're pretty rare. And I think that the time that people should be looking to be appointed are somewhere between 40 and 60. Ideally, the average is about 50, 55, that sort of an age. It varies, but I think that is an ideal time. I mean, listening, by the time you've done 12 years, day in, day out of the same, types of offences, the same drugs offences, the same public order offences, 12 years is enough to be listening to that. Yeah. So I think sort of mid-50s to late 50s is an ideal time to apply and to be appointed. You still get enough of your pension. I get 60% of a pension, which is still good. But I think I think after 20 years, you could be pretty tired of listening to the same stuff. So I think that's an ideal age. I was managing partner of the practice before I appointed. So I left behind, a practice that was easy, was able to absorb my work and so on. For a sole practitioner, it's horrendous. You get 4 weeks to leave. So I only had 4 weeks from the day I got the phone call from the minister to be gone out of my practice. And the day Michael D. Higgins, president, signs your warrant, you're not allowed to carry out any work. You have to be gone. So I worked 27 out of the 28 days between being nominated and my warrant being appointed. Easter Sunday was the only day I took off. And it takes that sort of level of work, even when you have people to take work from you. For a sole practitioner, it must be a horrendous exercise just trying to get rid of your practice. And it's a forced sale, it's a fire sale almost. So lots of people find that you might have notions that you're going to get a lot of money for your practice, but when you have 3 or 4 weeks, it's a fire sale. You take whatever you can get so that you can get out and get on with it. It can be a difficult enough transition. Then just once you are appointed, just moving on from that. I mean, the time frame is that when a vacancy arises, it normally takes about 8, 9, 10 weeks for that vacancy to be filled. Again, Catherine Staines was promoted mid-February. I was nominated mid-April, and I was sworn in mid-May. And so you have those 4 weeks where it's pretty intense just to get everything tidied up. And you're then sworn in, and there's excitement, and you have a great day, and it's a lovely day, and all that sort of stuff. But there is a bit of a change then in the way people treat you on the other side of being sworn in. As I say, earlier on, you lose your first name. But people do treat you that little bit differently, I think. You may have to make sure your dog has a license. You have to make sure you never go over the speed limit. You have to make sure your NCT is done. So there's a slight change, I think, then, and that just takes a bit of getting used to. But there are, in the district court, certainly, there are absolutely wonderful colleagues, and they're very, very supportive. And they would phone each other. People, 2 or 3 still phone me. I had one that phoned me this morning. How are you getting on? How just to check in, and there's great collegiality. It's fantastic, really.
So do you find a little distance then from your former solicitor colleagues?
A little bit sometimes, I think. Yeah, I mean, there is. You are different. You know what I mean? And even if some of them appear here in Tullamore that I'd have known in Kildare or whatever, and I give them a nod to come in for a cup of coffee or something at lunchtime or at the end of the day, it is different. It is different.
Just
but
not as easy, perhaps, not as or not as casual, maybe is a better way.
It's not as casual, exactly. It's not as casual, but that's part of the job. I mean, I expected that, so that happens, you know.
You're coping with that so far, is what you're telling us.
So far, so far.
Could I just bring one point in there, which might be around this loneliness issue? Is it a lonely job or existence?
Yes, it can be. It can be, certainly. There's great collegiality, as said in the CCJ. If you're down there, there's between 6 and 8 judges. But you know, there's almost like a secret entrance at the back that you go downstairs, you go into a special underground car park, you go in a special door, you go up a special lift. You don't meet anybody, you don't see anybody, and you go to your very nice chambers. But you actually sort of almost disappear into that building and never meet anybody. And similarly, I mean, here it's slightly different. I mean, the staff are in and out and what have you. But I'm in Tullamore Courthouse now. I haven't seen 3/4 of this. I come in one sort of special door, come down the corridor, up into my chambers, and I don't meet or see anybody. Now, it's not. It's certainly quiet, and it's an awful lot quieter if you're like I was used to working in an office where 16 were working, and you had 7 solicitors. You were in and out, up and down, coffee, you know, all that sort of stuff all day. It's not like that here. It's quiet. You have your lunch on your own. You read probation reports. You have your cup of coffee and your sandwich, and then you read probation reports. You do whatever needs to be done, and you're back out at 2 o'clock. So it is lonely is too strong a word to use, but it's certainly a solitary existence during the daytime, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So what if you were talking to a room full of solicitors who might be thinking about this, what would your advice be? Or would there be one or two things? Because you've touched on the remuneration side of things. You've touched on the holidays. You've also indicated though that it's when you're working, it's good hard work that needs to be done.
Oh that's not
at the top of your game in terms of getting it done. So I suppose those holidays then are well earned and and needed, I suppose, by the time they come round. We see the pros, I suppose, in moving out of practice, but you've also talked about some of the, I call them challenges maybe rather than cons, that moving into that somewhat less social environment, perhaps.
I mean, the holidays are good. People get the notion you only sit 4 days and you only do this. I mean, I have 2 days off in the month, but I also work 2 weekends every month.
Yeah.
You know, and you can get called out at the middle of the night. You can get, I mean, I know colleagues that have had to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and go and sit in courts. Yeah. And I get a call most weekends, and I say on average, I sit every second weekend. So I look at my 2 days off in lieu of that, and that's 2 days a month. There's no scheduled sitting. Now, as it turns out, I mean, I've sat all those days so far just to try and get to grips with the list and dealing with things here. So it is hard work, and there is a slight myth about days off. I haven't seen too many of them yet. Anyway.
Yeah. So what would be if you were just to pick one or two things that for you say to you made the right decision, what would they be?
The lack of phone calls and the lack of emails and the lack of stress,
the
lack of clients. There's an old story years ago. I won't say who it was, but he was a former president of the Law Society, and he met another solicitor, and he was outside his office pacing up and down, pulling out of a cigar. And so the solicitor went up to him, who actually ended up being a district court judge, and he said to him, "Well, what's wrong? What's up with you?" And he just said, "Clients, I hate that. So and so's."
I'm a little conscious of the time, and I think it's good to just discuss the process. I'm going to apply.
Okay. I'm going to apply.
Because I was going to particularly ask you to talk a little bit just about the references and the importance of the references that are submitted. Yeah.
Okay, but the process itself, you put in an application every year, so you have to renew it annually. As I said earlier on, from the day a vacancy arises, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks before there's a nomination. At present, there's approximately 100 applicants per job. So you need to be realistic about your chances, you know, and you may have to leave my application was in for 2 years. I think you need to be prepared for that. It's just not going to happen that quickly. There is there's a form you have to fill out. That's downloadable from the JAB website, jaab.ie. Anybody can have a look at that and fill it in and have a look at it. You also have to get a Standards and Public Office tax clearance certificate. And then thirdly, you have to get a reference. And I think I would recommend to anybody who's thinking of applying to have their application looked over professionally by somebody who is expert in doing CVs and interviews and so on. But your references are absolutely essential. You need good references that detail what you did that makes you suitable for appointment. So banal references like Andrew Cody is a man of great integrity and hardworking, and I have no hesitation recommending him, is useless. Forget it. No use whatsoever. I mean, if you're doing work in the mental health tribunal, you're doing it in Garda Discipline as I did, or Law Society, or whatever the case may be, you need to get a reference from a senior member of that organization detailing what you did. And detailing it over maybe 1, 2, or 3 pages. In my experience, references, and they say this, are hugely important. If you ask me what's the selection criteria is suitability. Some people say, there should be only one criteria for judicial appointment, that's merit. I would actually say suitability. And the minister needs to see that. There is a notion, it's all politics and what have you. None of the recent appointments that I know of had any political connection, good, bad, or indifferent. None whatsoever. I was a member of a political party 36 years ago. So I've never canvassed, I've never been a member of a party, I've never went to any function, did nothing. I had no involvement. Although, again, long time ago, I did. But none of the recent appointments that I know of had any political connection. And I think, and in my experience, what I've heard from people is actually TDs, and in particular ministers, they completely dislike being canvassed for judicial appointments. I know one person who was involved in a political party spoke to his local minister, and he said to him, I don't get involved.
Yes. Okay.
And he was a senior member of that party in the constituency, and he was brushed off, I don't get involved. That's a complete misnomer in my view. And I think if you're sort of currying up to a local TD or something, forget it. You need really good application form, and you need a really good reference that says what you did and how good you were at it. That's very important.
Yeah, and I suppose to go back then to the appointments themselves, if we probably all have a view there simply aren't enough district court judges in the country. But I mean, is there any discussion around the creation of more posts, or are you aware of any of that kind of discussion?
Yes, there's the Judicial Resources Committee, whatever it is going to report apparently in the next few weeks about the number of judges we need. I mean, there's a chronic shortage of judges. Yeah, the Judicial Planning Resource Group. There's a chronic shortage of judges. I think, and it's only just my opinion, that there'll be 10 extra High Court, Circuit Court, and District Court judges. I mean, they say for the new capacity legislation, they need 8 extra Circuit Court judges. I think and the High Court looked for 20 recently and got 5. So I think there'll probably be at least 10 across each jurisdiction. And I think that will be probably mid next year. I would hope that they would be in place for next September. So there'll be quite a few appointments, I think, next year, along with 1 or 2 retirements. And then there'll probably be 1 or 2 promotions to the Circuit Court. So you could see in the region of 50, I don't know again, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were somewhere in the region of 15 appointments to be made next year.
Yeah, so there's opportunity there, and you've also given us an indication of, I suppose, some of the experience that we can, even still seek to build for ourselves in terms of moving in that direction. And then it's make that application, and I think it'll be reassuring for at least some to hear that you don't see that political involvement in any of this, because that's always been, and maybe years ago it probably was, perhaps.
It probably was in the 50s, 60s. It is not anymore. It is on the basis of suitability. And any of my colleagues spoke about really good references from really good sources detailing what you did. I think if anybody's interested, I mean, if you could, I would talk to a sitting judge. I mean, go in and see what it's like, whether they like it, whether they don't like it. And I'd have no difficulty. Anybody wants to come in here and have a coffee or a lunch with me any day, I'd be happy to receive anybody. I have no difficulty whatsoever. You do need experience. So if you've never been in the district court, you've never done quasi-judicial type work, you're not going to get yourself to the top of the pile of that 100. So you need to be, applying for stuff like the mental health tribunals, the PRTB, Law Society, those sort of turf club I did, sporting organizations, legal services, regulatory authority, whatever it is. So getting that sort of quasi-judicial experience, I think, is very important. I think getting assistance in your application form is essential. I think maybe somebody like a retired judge should have a look over it. And as I said earlier on, good, strong, detailed references are absolutely essential. You won't go anywhere without it. So just in terms of the process, very quickly, I know I'm conscious of time. JAB meets, it's about 8 to 10 weeks. Judicial Appointments Board meet. They generally recommend approximately 7 for each position. And it is 7 out of 100 applicants. So you need to be in that tranche first. 7 then go to the minister. And I think the minister then decides, as I said, on the basis of suitability. And when I say about suitability, the appointment before me, for argument's sake, was for Donegal, for somewhere they needed Irish. I could have been Paddy Gageby or Micheál Higgins or anybody else. I wouldn't have got that. I don't speak Irish a million miles away from Donegal. I could never do out of hours. So I was never going to get that. I mean, similarly, in fact, the appointment after mine was somebody, as it turned out, from Donegal. They were never going to get my appointment living in Donegal. So that's why, I mean, you have to be suitable to the vacancy that arises. I think in the vacancies in the next year, there's a gap in terms of the number of judges we have in Dublin. I think one of the priorities in the next year to 18 months will be to appoint judges from Dublin. We don't have enough of judges in Dublin. Every day, 5 or 6 judges come from West Cork, Mullingar, Leitrim, Mayo, all over the country into Dublin to deal with Dublin's list. And I think they'll be looking for a lot of judges from Dublin. The other 2 judges that were appointed by me, and not by me, with me, were childcare experts. There is a big backlog of childcare cases at the moment. I mean, I've only spoken to the minister once in my life, so I have no idea what was in her mind. But you can see that appointments are filling a need, and that they're suitable for what the need is at that time.
Okay.
And I think the need in the future is going to be in Dublin.
Okay, so a little bit of research around, as you said already, you already have to be realistic about the numbers that are applying for each role. So you also have to be realistic about the opportunities and going back to the point you made about the suitability for those opportunities. Okay.
Quick question, Andrew. How many physical interviews did you have to have?
There is no interview. There's no interview for the job, and that's why the reference and a good reference and a good application are so important. This is paper-based. Again, I mean, I don't know, but I would be surprised if the minister doesn't speak to the president of the district court in terms of suitability. She has 7 applicants in front of her for each position. I suspect she talks to the president of the district court, or somebody talks to somebody to decide on what's suitable or not suitable. But to get there in the first place, you have to have a good CV, but there is no interview at this time. The new bill is proposing to have interviews, but I didn't do any interviews. Excuse me.
So I know we're coming up to the end, and Sonia, if you have any last or concluding questions, that would be great. I just wanted to point out to people that people might think it's a stitch up, or that the numbers are fixed in a certain way. Just to report on, in 2021, December 2021, there was a total of 107 applications, 75 solicitors, 32 barristers, 56 men, 51 women, and appointed in 2021 were 2 barristers, 4 solicitors, 3 men, 3 women. So that's a healthy number of solicitors being appointed as judges, and both on the gender balance issue. So it seems very healthy.
There is, I mean, for the last, I think I went back through the last 2 or 3 years. It's exactly 50-50 if you go back to even maybe 2018. So there is gender balance, certainly. Now, there's gender balance roughly in terms of applicants as well.
Yeah,
and,
but it seems like sisters are obviously applying more. There's more of them applying, but they seem to be getting more of the positions.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. In 2019, I think it was 5 solicitors to 1 barrister, and I think it was 4 to 2. 2019, I think in 2018, I think all 4 were solicitors. So
one last question there is: when is the new bill likely to come into force? And
as they said in Father Ted, that's an ecumenical question. I mean, I don't know. But if you take the example of things like the Legal Services Regulatory Authority Bill, that was around for 5 or 6 years. The same way the new Judicial Appointments Bill just seems to be going round and round. I don't know. I suspect it'll be 2 or 3 years. There doesn't seem to be any great move on it at the moment. I don't know.
So listen, guys, thank you very much, Judge Cody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think you've been frank, and everyone's really happy with your sort of down to earth. You've given us the warts and all of what's involved. Very interesting. You want to know when you're going to be a High Court judge. And Sonia, thanks again for joining us today. We'll send out a recording and a resources sheet of the information we've collated from the official documents with regards to applying. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.
Great session. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks, Judge Cody. Thanks for your time.
All the best. Thank you.
Slán agus gur maith agat.